I just remind those who may be entering the public gallery that they are welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode, and that all devices are muted. It is not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. In terms of apologies, Clerk, have you any apologies for the meeting?
Tom Buchanan.
So Tom Buchanan.
And then we have
Okay.
Daniel arriving.
Daniel's going to arrive a little bit later. Okay. Okay, declarations of interest. Remind you of your responsibility to declare any interest in any items under discussion today. Or just declaring any interest, William? Do you want to declare an interest?
And declaring that there's been a partner in the farm business.
Brilliant. Thank you. Happy now?
Yes, last week.
Thank you, Declan. William, appreciate that. Agenda item 3, Chairperson's Business. Item 1, refer you to page 7 of the pack to a letter dated 17th of September from Cathy Mason, MLA, regarding the impact of bovine TB on the Southdown farming community. Members, it is request that the committee hear evidence from farmers affected by BTB following a meeting organised by Farmers for Action that she recently attended at Seaford. Have you any comments to make at this stage? Are you content that we add that to our forward work programme? Thank you, members. Item number 2, I refer you to page 8 of the pack to correspondence dated the 18th of September from Chris Hazard, MP for Southdown, also regarding bovine TB. He has requested that we outline the scrutiny we have undertaken to date in the matter. Members, as you will all know, this is a topic in which we have taken a keen interest and are aware of the devastating impact it had on the farming community. So, members, you will recall we have taken evidence over the past year or so on bovine TB, including from the UFU and the Minister and the Chief Veterinary Officer. Most recently, at our meeting on the 1st of May, we considered the bovine tuberculosis in Northern Ireland blueprint for eradication, and it's a matter that remains on our agenda. Members, do you wish the team to put together a note of all we have done to date, and then next week we can consider the note and decide on the next steps?
Yeah.
Thank you, members. Item number 3, I refer you to page 4 of the table papers to correspondence dated the 18th of September from the Department regarding the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Bill. A link to the bill and explanatory notes is provided. Members, the Government introduced the bill to the House of Commons on the 9th of September and is seeking consent for clauses that relate to devolved matters. The purpose of the bill is to enable the UK to implement the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ agreement, which is easier to say. An updated legislative consent memorandum will be led in the Assembly once the analysis is complete. The Executive has agreed to draft legislative consent motion, and the Department will provide a further update in due course. If you have any comments at this stage, you content to note, and we will of course return to this matter once the LCM has been laid. Thank you, members. Agenda item 4 minutes of the meeting on the 18th of September. Refer to page 1121 of the pack for the draft minutes of that meeting. Have you any comments? Are you content with the minutes as drafted? If so, I'm going to sign them, and then they'll be published on the website. Yep. Thank you, members. Okay. Agenda item 5, matters arising. Item 1, refer you to the table papers at page 7 for the response from the Department dated 23rd of September to our query regarding the Northern Ireland Food Animal Information System. Some call it NIFAS, Stage 2 update. At our meeting on the 11th of September, we agreed to request the Department communicate with March to ensure there are alternative paper-based arrangements in place should electricity supply be lost due to storms or other issues. Members, the response states that March can avail of the paper-based MC2 system using free of charge MC2 movement books during an IT outage, and the NIFAS project team will remind all external users of this and of the need for contingency planning as part of the Stage 2 rollout. Have you any comments? Are you content to note that at this stage?
No.
Yep, thank you, members. Item number 2, I refer to table papers at page 10 for the response from the Department dated the 24th September regarding our queries regarding the NIEA fees and charges inflationary uplift. 25-26. We wrote to the Department following our meeting on the 11th of September requesting evidence of improved performances following the uplift. Members, the response states that the NIEA does not receive any fees for the provision of its planning advice, and therefore the uplift in fees and charges does not apply to work undertaken on planning consultations. In relation to improved planning performance, figures for the first 5 months of this year indicate a 65% response rate for the 1,566 statutory planning consultations received, remaining the same as reported to us on the 24th of October 2024. Due to higher levels of consultations being received than planning teams can respond to. Long-term sicknesses, as well as diversion of staff to planning improvement measures, remains an issue in the Natural Environment Division, and an increase in staffing levels is expected once recruitment processes are complete. NIEA will brief us on its draft planning improvement plan at our meeting on the 6th of November. So that's 4 or 5 weeks away. Members, So on the face of it, there doesn't seem to be any improvement, but there are issues still in there. So I'm content if we return to that when they come to us on the 6th of November. If members are content. William, you've indicated?
Yes, in my experience and recently, NAA may have improved slightly, but SAS is a big issue. I have a number that have been consulted by planners in June, still no response from SAS. So I think we as a committee need to do something.
Yeah, I think
SAS.
to be fair, I mean, in what they've given us is a 65 response rate for the statutory planning consultations means 35% haven't received the response to, and that is outside of what you're talking about, which is further on into the process. So, I mean, we can write back to them, note that we've received that, and note the committee's concerns in regard to that, if that's a lack of progress, and then we will have them in front of us on the 6th of November.
I mean, SAS doesn't seem answerable to anyone. Can we not go directly to SAS? NAA is a different ball game. There have been issues now for a couple of years with staffing levels and all the NAA, but
SES?
SAS is the big issue at the moment.
We're going to talk about that in the next slide.
Okay, we'll be coming to that as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're going to come to that in 2 agenda items, if that's okay. John?
Sure. I'm mindful that if the figures of 1,566 statutory planning consultations relate only to that 5-month period and not any outstanding that existed before that period, then the people here that we're talking about are dealing with 300 of these a month, and that is a hefty workload in anybody's book. However, it's important for applicants that things are processed efficiently and effectively. I'm thinking to possibly tie in William's points that he raised. We are likely to be discussing or corresponding with SAS on the odor issues, and there's no reason why we couldn't build into that an inquiry on processes, because those will relate to odor issues as well. They're odor issues related to planning applications. And there's no reason why we can't build that into the work we're already doing in terms of their timelines and processes, if people have colleagues are happy with that.
I think their targeted response time something like 28 days, and the ones I'm talking about are months, 3 and 4 months, and no response.
So we could build that in.
Okay, we'll build that in. So we'll be picking that up in the next agenda item anyway, if that's
Okay.
all right. So. Members content. So in terms of the NIEA response, members content. We're seeing them on the 6th of November. We'll revisit and we'll alert them to the fact we received the information, and there's obviously still some concern within the committee on that. Okay. Agenda item 6, update on the current issues regarding local waste odour complaints, odour and waste, which members have already spoken into. Members, as you will recall, last week we took a briefing from RAISE regarding the odour assessment sniff test used by NIEA and other authorities across neighbouring jurisdictions, and then we had a close session to discuss how to proceed regarding the odour and waste complaints that we have been receiving. We agreed that to further our due diligence on the matter, the clerk would bring a series of draft letters to this week's meeting, and I referred the pack to the following letters. 1 to the NIEA, starting at page 24 of your pack, to seek information on target number 12 in the NIEA business plan, which includes contributing to the development of odour guidance with the target date of the 31st of March 2026. You will recall we highlighted that the current guidance is from 2012. 1 to NI councils, querying the processes they are following on odour assessment, starting at page 26 of the pack. And then of note to yourselves, 1 to SES, which is the Shared Environmental Service in Mid and East Antrim Council, regarding any role that it has in odour assessments done by councils or NIEA. That starts at page 29 of the pack if you want to look at that, guys, because I'm getting the sense that you might want to ensure that some of your concerns are picked up in that correspondence.
Page
29 of the original pack, is that in? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Page 29.
29.
Pack. Yeah.
Rather than tabled.
Okay, so if you're content with the other two, and then we'll just look at the SES. So the first one was NIEA on page 24, second one was the councils on 26, and then the third one of note is SES, and that's at page 29.
Chair, it'll not be hard to
Okay.
sort of beef up.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're
Cover
content,
that.
rather than try and do it ad hoc, if you're content, we could agree this by correspondence, and the clerk will add a line in there picking up the points that you've raised. Are you content with that? So we'll agree that one by correspondence and get it sent?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so everything else there's fine. And okay, thank you, Clark.
And it could be discussed further
Yeah, absolutely.
on the 6th of November if needs be.
Totally.
With others.
Totally agree. Yeah. Okay, now going to refer you to the following for further information on the SES. Minutes of the evidence starting at page 31 of the pack from the last time the SES briefed an DAERA committee, which was on the 22nd of April 2021. There's also a news article referring to the SES, and that was from August 2020. It's in your pack, and that starts at page 42. More for your information. In addition, I refer you to more recent correspondence to the Committee on Waste and Odour Matters. An email from Rotten to the Point dated the 18th of September 2025 relating to complaints from the public on odour issues at Warren Point Harbour. Starting at page 47 of the pack, correspondence we have been copied into dated 23rd of September from an individual regarding an apparent regulatory breach arising from the relocation of baled waste at Derry Boy Road. Starting at page 15 of the tabled papers, it's quite detailed. Correspondence we have been copied into dated 23rd of September from an individual regarding a complaint in relation to unauthorised storage handling areas at Warren Point, starting at page 22 of table papers, and further correspondence dated 24th of September from an individual regarding a complaint in relation to authorised storage handling areas at Warren Point, starting at page 27 of your papers. Members, have you any comments on those? Or are you contented that we will be picking those up in our forward work plan on this matter? They're all useful? Yep. Thank you, members. Okay, we're going to now go to agenda item 9, and that is the Departmental Oral Evidence Session on Waste and Resource Common Framework. So members, I refer you to pages 66 to 107 of the pack for a briefing paper providing an update on the progress of the Common Framework and to submit the provisional Common Framework for our scrutiny. So I'm now going to welcome the following officials from the Environmental Resources Policy Division to the meeting and invite them to brief the committee. We have Mr. Colin Breen, the Assistant Director, and Carmel McDowell, the Acting Head of Waste Legislation. So, thank you, and when you're comfortable, please feel free to brief the committee. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to come here today and provide you with a briefing on the Resources and Waste Common Framework. DAERA is the NICS lead for 15 common frameworks, and the Resources and Waste Common Framework is one of the few remaining frameworks yet to undergo scrutiny by the committee. It covers the multiple legislative systems relating to waste and resource efficiency as part of the wider approach to delivering a circular economy. The development of the Resources and Waste Common Framework is based on the underlying principles agreed by the Joint Ministerial Committee between 2017 and 2020 by the 4 UK legislatures. Those principles are that common frameworks will be established where necessary to ensure the UK can negotiate, enter into and implement new trade agreements and international treaties, and ensure compliance with international obligations. These principles were established in the context of an ambition for close working between the UK Government and devolved governments on reserved matters that significantly impact devolved responsibilities. Overall, waste is a policy area that has been comprehensively legislated for. Most of the subject matter of the relevant legislation falls into devolved competence and as such has been legislated by each individual nation. Other areas such as producer responsibility has been legislated for on a UK-wide basis where it has made sense to do so, given the nature of the complex value chains involved. Under the framework, decision-making on reserved matters will continue to sit with the UK Government in line with the devolution settlements. However, the UK Government will involve the devolved administrations as fully as possible in decision-making on non-devolved matters, which impact on devolved matters or have a distinctive importance to a devolved nation. The Resources and Waste Common Framework is intended to facilitate multilateral policy development and set out high-level commitments by the UK Government, Scottish Government, Welsh Government and DAERA. These will include policy decisions for areas and scope of the framework, including policy creation, regulatory change, as well as policy operational issues. The resolution of issues, including before needing to initiate the dispute resolution mechanism, referring issues to the overarching dispute avoidance and resolution mechanism outlined in the framework, and reviewing and amending the framework. The framework provides a governance structure that allows for issues discussed at a working level to be escalated to senior officials if necessary, in line with the dispute avoidance and resolution mechanism. The parties recognise that changes could have impacts on regulation, policy, the UK internal market and international obligations that need to be discussed and considered through the arrangements set out in the framework. The previous DAERA Minister agreed the outline agreement for the Resources and Waste Common Framework in January 2021. The Resources and Waste Provisional Common Framework, Framework Outline Agreement and Concordat was published in December 2022. It is a non-legislative framework and part of the Common Frameworks programme. You will note that the published document contains references to the Northern Ireland Protocol. It is this version that has been scrutinised by the legislatures of England, Scotland and Wales and is awaiting scrutiny by the committee. Once scrutiny has been completed by you, the committee, any recommendations for amendments will be assessed by senior policy officials from the four administrations. Text relating to the Windsor Framework will replace references to the Northern Ireland Protocol when the text is agreed by the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. Those recommendations that are accepted will be included in the framework and the amended document will be professionally proofread. After a final review by policy officials across the four nations, it will be agreed at a ministerial level across the four nations as well as the First and Deputy First Ministers. The final common framework will then be deposited in the Westminster Library by Cabinet Office. So that's the end of the briefing, so we're happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Seems like quite a high level piece of work. Okay, so I have three questions for you, if that's okay. And whoever is best fitted to respond to them is good. Does the department have any major concerns at the moment on the common framework as it stands, and has it worked well for Northern Ireland?
Yeah.
So no concerns. Some of the language needs updating because it hasn't been scrutinised, and some of the language is out of date, but that's not a major concern. That's just something that is presentational. Generally, we work well across the four nations and across the island on all these resource and waste matters. There have been times where the framework has worked well, sort of deposit return scheme, single-use vapes. So we have really no concerns. It has been working well. It has been in place, although not legally as such, for quite some time.
What's the status in the other devolved jurisdictions then?
So, well, I'll let you go.
It's effectively the same. You know, the programme was sort of stalled for a time there. The current framework document as it's published has been scrutinised by the other three legislatures, and whenever the scrutiny is done by yourselves today or in the coming weeks, it will then go forward to the next step of any recommendations coming through, and then those recommendations being evaluated and either put in or removed from the framework.
Has there been a submission by the other, in terms of that scrutiny from the other devolved regions, and have they offered their own scrutiny? Is that?
I'm not aware of anything.
It's been a while since I've spoken to any of them about it, because it happened quite a while ago, but I think it all passed with very, very little to see here sort of thing, because it's a very procedural mechanism, not to sort of downplay it or anything like that there, but it wouldn't be a contentious thing.
Okay, and the only, one of the things, and you mentioned that the word is in regard to the Windsor framework, and there's a piece of high level work which is done to reword that. Is the department concerned about that, and has that been assessed in terms of the not the operation of it, but the political intent on it, and if it causes any concern here?
I think the text on the Windsor framework has been agreed at a sort of senior policy official level. My understanding is that its final agreement sits with our Deputy First and Deputy First Ministers for final sign-off on that, but as far as I understand, it's gone through whatever agreement process is necessary for the rest of the legislatures.
So then, in the last one then, members, just so you're ready for your own questions, in relation to the forthcoming consultation into the waste management strategy, with the last strategy being published in 2013, how will the framework tie in with the forthcoming strategy and support the transition to a more sustainable and circular waste management system in Northern Ireland to help us achieve our high-level targets for net zero?
That'll be for me then. I suppose a lot of what we're talking about in the waste strategy, and a lot of waste is devolved. So quite often the common framework won't come in at all. Where we can collaborate together or with the other nations, we will do so, and the common framework will even then really only come in largely as a dispute resolution mechanism. For the majority of things, we just work as we've always done. Work on local matters if they're best done in a local way, on sort of collaborative matters like extended producer responsibility, deposit return scheme, on a multi-nation basis. So there really will be very little change, but it's just another mechanism as a safeguard. It won't stop the good work that has been going on for many years, and it won't really change it.
And just a final, and this is me just picking up on something that was a wee answer there, in regard to collaboration, because we are in a space where waste has a particular role to play in terms of that decarbonisation, all of that. Are there good and sound collaborative initiatives between each of the nations, just in terms of best practice? Not so much the policy and the strategy and the conformity, but identifying good practice.
So I don't even think I could count the number of different collaborative groups I'm on for various different work streams. But we always share best practice, but we always have to recognise that every nation works slightly differently in a lot of these things, which is why much of waste is devolved. But we are a very sort of open market in terms of waste moving around the UK, so there's an awful lot of collaboration in that area on things like recycling, best practice, learning from each other. We do a lot of things very similarly because we have similar reprocessors, for example, and they need similar quality materials, and there is a lot of sort of overarching legislation into things like waste shipments. So that will need collaboration for us working together, and that's again why digital waste tracking has been done on a sort of collaborative basis. So I think we always start with local solutions, looking at best practice from elsewhere, not just GB, but from anywhere that has done well, and then in things that are clearly able to be done or better done on a 4 nations or 3 nations, whatever number of nations basis, then we will always collaborate on those. But yeah, as officials, we're talking pretty much constantly about how we can improve this and do it together, because a big thing we're looking on at the moment is sort of decarbonisation pathways for the most difficult to recycle wastes, so absorbent hygiene products, dense plastics, mattresses, textiles, those things that cause a lot of emissions being made during the creation.
I actually want just one wee question there, Colin, because I'm going to move on to members here shortly. I'm interested in this one. So in my most recent to a very popular soft drink bottling plant in Lisburn, I'll not name them, but they're globally huge. So they were at pains to point out to me their move from virgin plastic into recycled, and I think they're pretty much there. When we achieve something like that, is there a calculation that then readjusts our climate ambition to recognise the good work that is done? That is that an ongoing process? Maybe it's not your department, but is that because it's bound to be linked?
Yeah. So the emissions industry is quite high level, so you'll not see maybe that granularity, but that will be there'll be a number of things there. Like they're not going to be importing. Yeah. A lot of virgin plastics produced elsewhere, so the emissions are actually counted elsewhere. But climate change is a global problem, so you may not see it drastically in the Northern Ireland emissions, but that move away from virgin plastic into recycled plastic is having an impact on, because virgin plastic's made with oil, essentially. So there is a reduction in the use of fossil fuels is a reduction in emissions over time.
Okay, thank you so much, Declan.
Thank you. Carmel, in the introduction you said that the decision making rests with the UK government, but it involves the devolved institutions. What mechanisms is there in place to involve the devolved institutions in the common framework?
Well, generally, any policy issues are discussed on a regular basis, just as normal working groups. On the Four Nations, we meet regularly with our teams. In terms of reserved matters, there's regular meetings with our colleagues in DAERA, and while they have the decision-making, the UK government has the decision-making facility in reserved matters, they always try to bring the devolved nations in and let them have their input into any decisions going forward. But obviously, sort of the decision-making ultimately rests with the UK government.
And I can maybe outline a bit more. So, you know, at official level, there's various resource and waste project groups across the Four Nations. There's a sort of a higher level resource and waste portfolio board which covers them all. Then there's the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs senior officials group that governs all of this, and then there's the interministerial group that sits over that. So that's, you know, so there are a number of sort of layers of governance there.
Thank you, Carmel and Hung. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Declan. Aoife?
Thanks, yeah. So thanks for everything so far. It's been really useful information. Just a quick one, you did talk on about collaboration, but the circular economy is an area where the South is moving at pace with legislation and targets that are ambitious and EU aligned. How will this UK-wide framework ensure that the North is able to complement rather than diverge from the South?
So, you know, some of those will actually be in the Windsor framework, and some of those have already been transposed prior to EU exit. So quite a few of them exist in Northern Ireland as well. You know, and we will, on top of that, we do collaborate with Ireland as well as the other nations. So, you know, I suppose we will collaborate sort of at an official level. Good examples of that are deposit and return scheme. And then our minister will collaborate with Irish ministers on a one-to-one basis. And then we'll have the North-South Ministerial Council Environment themes, of which circular economy is one of them. And we also, the British-Irish Council, again, circular economy is a theme on there. So we do recognise the importance of it across, you know, dealing in both islands, and that, you know, waste moves across borders on this island and on GB, and left to right, right to left.
Okay.
So yeah, we're well engaged, and we do recognise, you know, there are a few differences that mean that, you know, some areas of collaboration don't work, or that maybe aren't. For example, the household collections in Southern Ireland are done privately, so, you know, there's a bit of difference there that means that we maybe don't work as closely in best practice and something like that. But we have lots of good examples of areas where we do. So it's I suppose it's on a policy by policy basis.
Thanks. And just really quickly, just in terms of cross-border, how can this help address cross-border waste crime, like for instance Mumbai or whatever?
Probably outside of our area of expertise. That's probably more, like, it's obviously the more joined up and the more regulation there is into waste, and the more sort of investigations there are, but that's unfortunately sort of outside of our area. It's probably one for NIA.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Aoife and John.
Thanks, Chair. Colin, Carmel, good to see you both, and thanks for your report. On the report under section 4, but over on page 10, there's mention here of UK-wide approach, and then goes on to talk about where parties have worked independently, for example, in the development of waste prevention programmes and recycling targets. The first part of the question then is this framework going to be either analytical or advisory, rather than trying to implement targets around that on the different regions? And then secondly, how does that fit with other policy areas, such as circular economy, but also crucially the climate piece, whenever there is a UK climate change target, a CO2 reduction target? Does it not make sense that there's some kind of more formal oversight of the framework and how all those different areas, including recycling, fit into that overall UK target? Or are they simply left to separate business areas to develop themselves.
In terms of, the framework's is a very specific thing. That's not to say we aren't, there aren't other things working on. So the framework is quite a specific mechanism. Aside from that, we are working together on best practice in recycling targets, recognising that different nations are, like Wales have a much higher recycling target than the rest of us and are doing better than the rest of us on recycling at the minute. And in terms of climate change, there are other mechanisms. So the common framework itself.
So individual policy areas and departments and business areas will feed into the chain, if you like, on the overall UK climate change targets then. Yeah, okay, I can understand that, but the framework's oversight. Then on the review of the framework, there's a suggested review there, I think, after 6 months, and then yearly and bi-yearly, possibly after that. Can I ask, at the review stage, will there be a public consultation around that review, or will that be an internal process?
I don't know that yet.
Okay.
We can take that away and find out for you.
Thank you.
John, okay, members. Michelle.
Very briefly, thank you for your presentation. Just in relation to the exportation of our waste, is there any discussion really around restricting the volume that is exported? Because obviously mindful that quite a lot of it will go for recycling, which is grand, because obviously maybe we don't have the ability to recycle some of the items. But there's also a lot of waste will go just for incineration, and perhaps we don't have the capacity in Northern Ireland to deal with that. But just as a discussion around for policy, are you looking at that?
We're in the middle of doing an assessment of what infrastructure we have. It's clear there isn't enough infrastructure in Northern Ireland or on this island. That is why we have so many waste exports. It has to go somewhere essentially, because people unfortunately like to use and throw away stuff, and there's still a lot more can be done in recycling to take it down, but unfortunately with a lack of indigenous infrastructure, we couldn't essentially ban exports or reduce exports, because it still needs to go somewhere, and that is a very, very big problem, yes, without a doubt. And we're constantly looking to see what contingencies there are, what way it can be dealt with more locally. There are legal principles around proximity and self-sufficiency where we're supposed to deal with waste as close to where it's produced as possible, but at the minute there just isn't the infrastructure there to deal with it.
There are a number of options that have been around for a long time, including R21 and others, and I suppose it's really just looking really for leadership within the department too, about sort of driving forward some of those solutions.
Yeah, well, I suppose unfortunately a lot of the decisions rest with planning, DFI, and I don't believe we can unduly influence the planning process. And there's also the issue of a great deal of these are to do with private procurement. So the department have been playing their part in all of that, but there are a lot of moving parts, and it's not where it should be in terms of infrastructure, and that's something that's been recognised over many years and over many reports.
I appreciate what you're saying. I suppose it really is about Northern Ireland PLC. I suppose is taking waste by the neck really, and just sort of looking at it and saying, this is maybe we need to be a bit more serious about how we deal with our waste rather than exporting it and making it somebody else's problem. Okay, well, thank you.
William.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in relation to exported waste, have we any idea of the tonnage of waste that goes for incineration abroad?
We can get those figures. I just don't have them to hand, but we can get those figures.
It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, we've done a few recent assembly questions with those sort of figures. It's in the hundreds of thousands of tonnes. I know that. So, but we can follow that up and give you the most recent figures.
Like said, we're exporting the problem somewhere else. Would it make sense to look at ways of dealing with it locally if possible?
Yeah, and we're exporting not just, it's not all a problem, you know, we're exporting to people who are then using it to create energy and heat and all those things that we're losing out on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're, yeah, it's, without a doubt,
Benefits.
yeah, we're losing out on a number of benefits by not having sort of indigenous infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
And final one's just occurred to me because there's a part of the framework talks about forget the word. I'm going to ask you: does the framework cover giving guidance on storage of waste? It's
No, the framework is really just a governance structure.
high level,
effectively, it doesn't really suggest policy or set policy. That's for individual departments and groups within those departments sort of to bring forward for discussion within the framework.
Okay. Members content?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time today. Okay, members, if you're content with what you've heard today, then we can complete the scrutiny now. As we know, all of these common frameworks will be reviewed once finalised, or we can return to discuss the common framework further in the near future. I'll ask the clerk to set aside some time in the forward work programme. But are you content with today's piece of work and then wait on the compilation of the common frameworks and look at them when they're finalised? Is that okay? Okay, thank you, clerk. Okay.
So, Chair, that means I will write to the department to say the committee is content.
We're content.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, agenda item 11 then is the bovine genetics. Oh yeah, sorry. Agenda item 10 was to be the departmental oral evidence session on air quality common framework. That's now been moved and postponed until October the 16th. We're now going to take agenda item 11, which is the bovine genetics genotyping scheme regulations on 2025 oral evidence from the department. So members, in addition to the briefing we are about to hear on the bovine genetics regulations, the officials will also provide a high-level overview of the bovine genetics farm sustainability payment conditionalities, which is a component of the SL1, the Farm Sustainability Standards Regulations on 2025, which we're going to be briefed on next week. So members, I refer you to page 210 to 223 of the pack for the SL1, the draft SR and the explanatory memorandum. The department intends to make this SR under the negative resolution procedure to provide it with the legal powers to implement the bovine genetics genotyping scheme. So members, I now welcome the following CAFRE officials to the meeting and invite them to brief the committee. Paul McHenry, Director, Francis Breen, Head of Livestock Genetics and Data Branch, and Noel Lavery, the Senior Technologist, Livestock Genetics and Data Branch. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're very keen to hear your evidence.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to provide the committee with a policy briefing on DAERA's bovine genetics project and to present to you the bovine genetics genotyping scheme regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. Previously, on the 10th October 2024, we provided the committee with a written briefing on the bovine genetics project. I will begin with a brief overview of the project, and I'll then pass to Francis Breen, who will provide an overview of the bovine genetics genotyping scheme and take you through the statutory rule you have in front of you. Just to set it in context, the agricultural production sector employs approximately 52,000 people across 26,000 farms and has a gross output of approximately 2.9 billion. The dairy and beef subsectors dominate agricultural production in Northern Ireland and account for approximately 51% of the value of output ex-farm. The bovine genetics project is one of the measures being progressed through the DAERA Sustainable Agriculture Programme. This project is of significant interest to industry. It is also of significant interest to government due to the public good benefits of breeding animals with enhanced production efficiency, lower pollution potential, lower carbon footprints and improved health and welfare. Genetic improvement is also detailed as a mitigation for the agriculture sector included within the draft Climate Action Plan 23 to 27 and is identified as a key measure in the bovine tuberculosis Northern Ireland blueprint for eradication and is one of the mitigations identified in the DAERA draft ammonia strategy. Genetic improvement is achieved as a result of breeding from the best performing animals within a population. This requires the identification of those animals with the most desirable traits. The project will provide farmers with the data and evidence to identify animals with the most desirable traits at a younger age. to therefore make better informed breeding decisions to accelerate the rate of genetic gain, particularly in traits which are difficult to identify visually, for example, feed efficiency. Genetic improvement in cattle can deliver long-term and permanent changes to a range of desirable traits, leading to more profitable, efficient animals with reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Very few farm businesses with breeding herds have access to genetic information on their animals. Only 30% of dairy cows and 2% of suckler cows have genetic merit information available. Indeed, this information is currently unavailable to those herds with pedigree animals. Therefore, the key issue is that the vast majority of breeding decisions are made in the absence of robust information to identify an animal's genetic potential. Most breeding decisions are based on the visual appearance of the animals and the breeder's intuition. Without genetic information feeding into breeding decisions, the majority of dairy and suckler beef farmers are not utilising the opportunity to breed more efficient, healthier, productive animals with lower carbon footprints. Genotyping the dairy and suckler cattle population is a critical component to deliver the Bovine Genetics Project in Northern Ireland. Genotyping is a lab procedure which analyses DNA to identify genetic differences between individuals or populations. Genotyping enables the accurate identification of animal parentage, which is critical to ensure the genetic merit information provided to farmers is accurate. Without accurate parentage information, it is impossible to provide accurate genetic information on individual animals. Genotyping also enables genetic merit information to be provided for traits where it is currently impossible to identify at farm level, such as feed efficiency and genes which directly impact on animal health and welfare. Genotyping of animals for this project will involve the analysis of an ear tissue sample which is collected using an ear tag, similar to the process that's used for BVD eradication programme. The full business case for the Bovine Genetics Project concluded that maximum benefits will be achieved through the genotyping of the entire Northern Ireland dairy and beef male and female cattle breeding populations, including replacement young stock in each annual dairy and beef calf crop. The full business case for the Bovine Genetics Project was approved in December 2024 with a capital budget of 60.5 million. The project has the potential to deliver significant monetary benefits, and it is projected to generate a net present value to the Northern Ireland economy of approximately 372 million over 30 years. This project is being delivered by DAERA in partnership with the agri-food industry, who have established a non-for-profit company, Sustainable Ruminant Genetics Limited. SRG sponsoring organisations are the Ulster Farmers Union, the Livestock and Meat Commission, the Northern Ireland Meat Exporters Association and the Dairy Council for Northern Ireland. SRG is working collectively with DAERA to deliver several key functions, including the supply of industry data and the promotion and marketing of the project to producers and other stakeholders. SRG was established in June 22 and have appointed a dedicated CEO in November 2023. To date, SRG are engaging widely through the supply chain to gain widespread support for the project, evidenced by the securing of data sharing agreements from livestock markets and the main dairy and beef processors. Securing data from these sources will significantly reduce the amount of data required directly from farm businesses. Following an open tender procurement, the service contract for the Bovine Genetics Project was awarded to the Irish Cattle Breeders Federation, ICBF, and ICBF has also engaged the services of AHDB to provide genetic evaluations bespoke to the Northern Ireland dairy sector. The contract commenced on the 1st of January 2025, and ICBF had considerable experience and expertise on the delivery of genetic improvement in the Republic of Ireland. Mr. Chairman, I will now pass over to Francis Breen to take you through the provisions of the SR relating to the Bovine Genetics Scheme and the proposed farm sustainability conditionalities.
Okay, thanks Paul. Firstly, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the Bovine Genetics Genotyping Scheme. As highlighted earlier, the implementation of industry-wide genotyping is critical to deliver the Bovine Genetics Project. failure to accurately identify animal parentage, and genes relating to specific desirable traits would undermine the accuracy of information presented to farmers and therefore result in a failure to deliver the project objectives. The Bovine Genetics Genotyping Scheme is planned to provide support to herd owners to incentivise them to genotype their animals. The total approved business case budget for the scheme is 16.6 million, which is based on all eligible animals being genotyped. Animal eligibility and opt-in functionality for the scheme will be provided on a dedicated bovine genetics user portal located on the Sustainable Rumen Genetics website and accessible through the normal government gateway process. Detailed guidance and a link to the scheme rules will be available on the DAERA website and the Bovine Genetics user portal. I will now take the committee through the provisions in the SR that you have in front of you. These regulations establish the Bovine Genetics Genotyping Scheme. The scheme provides the legal powers for payments to be made by the Department to eligible farm businesses which meet the scheme requirements. Skipping citation and commencement and interpretation, I will begin with Regulation 3. Regulation 3 specifies the payment which the Department will make under these regulations of £14 per eligible genotype to an eligible farm business. Payment to an eligible farm business will be conditional upon the receipt by the Department of a satisfactory eligible genotype provided on behalf of the eligible farm business from its service provider. Payment shall be made as soon as reasonably practical to the eligible farm business which submits the sample to the approved genotyping laboratory. Regulation 4 specifies the eligibility requirements for animals and businesses. It specifies eligible animals as 1. All existing dairy and beef cows. Number 2. All existing dairy and beef young stock females. 3. All existing dairy and beef stock bulls and those males with potential to be a stock bull in the future, which are in the herd of the applicant between the 1st of September 2026 and the 31st of December 2027. And also, number 4, all new birth registrations, both male and female, dairy and beef, between the 1st of January 2027 and the 31st of December 2027. It specifies that the Department shall issue payment for eligible genotyping events in which an eligible cow has given birth to dead calves from the date of commencement of these regulations. It specifies that the Department shall not issue payment for any subsequent genotyping events for animals not in the herd of the applicant on the 31st of December 2027. It specifies that, subject to eligibility criteria being met, the Department shall issue payment for eligible genotypes received up to and including the 15th of May 2028. It specifies that an eligible farm business shall apply to be part of the scheme and that applicants shall provide such further information in relation to any animal as the Department may request. It specifies that the tissue tag used by the applicant must be used by an approved DAERA supplier. Regulation 5 specifies the tissue sampling requirements for live eligible animals. It specifies that the keeper of an eligible animal shall take a tissue sample from that animal during the scheme duration period and dispatch the tissue sample to an approved laboratory for genotyping within 7 days of taking the sample. It specifies that in relation to new birth registrations, a tissue sample shall be taken as soon as possible after the birth and not later than 20 days after the birth. Regulation 6 specifies the tissue sampling requirements for aborted fetuses, stillborn calves and calves which die before being tagged. It specifies that as soon as reasonably practical, a tissue sample is taken from an aborted fetus, stillborn or a calf which dies before being tagged, the abortion or birth notified to the Department, and that the tissue sample is dispatched to an approved laboratory for genotyping within 7 days of taking the sample. Regulation 7 specifies the requirements with regard to inadequate tissue samples. It specifies that where the service provider is notified by an approved laboratory that a tissue sample is not adequate to be subject to analysis, the service provider shall, by notice issued to the keeper, require the keeper to submit a further sample before the end of the scheme duration. It specifies that the keeper shall ensure that a further tissue sample is taken from the eligible animal and that tissue sample is dispatched to an approved laboratory for genotyping within 7 days of taking that sample. Regulation 8 specifies that a person shall not tamper with the tissue sample or do any act or thing to attempt to do any act or thing to cause or permit any act or thing done that is likely to affect the result of any analysis required to be carried out under this scheme. Regulation 9 specifies the Department shall use the information recorded on NIFIS along with the information provided from the service provider to determine whether the scheme eligibility requirements are met. It specifies that NIFIS and the service provider information shall be conclusive evidence unless otherwise rebutted or corrected to the satisfaction of the Department by an eligible farm business. Regulations 10 and 11 provide the general powers for withholding and recovery of overpayments and powers of authorised persons. Regulation 12 specifies that with effect from the 1st of January 2028, the rules on farm sustainability shall apply in relation to requirements about bovine genetics. Finally, the schedule provides details on the breeds of cattle which are eligible under the scheme. I'll now move on to the proposed bovine genetics farm sustainability payment conditionality. You've already received an update on the FSP legislation on the 26th of June, which provided a high-level overview of the associated FSP conditionalities. Officials will be providing an update on all proposed FSP conditionalities in the coming weeks. I would like to provide a more detailed description of the proposed FSP conditionality requirement, specifically in relation to the bovine genetics project. So that conditionality is registration and training. Given the investment by both government and industry to develop the genetics platform, it is critical that an effective policy instrument is in place to drive access and uptake of the data being provided for farmers, allowing them to access enterprise performance and make better informed breeding decisions. It's proposed that farm businesses with bovine animals must have registered for the project and completed training by the closing date of the single application form window, the 15th of May 2028, to be compliant. It is proposed that a 10% penalty will be applied through FSP in 2028. The penalty will be increased to 15% for continued non-compliance in 2029 and will continue to be applied at 15% until the conditionality has been met. Registration functionality will be provided on a dedicated bovine genetics user portal, which is hosted on the Sustainable Ruminant Genetics website and accessible through the normal government gateway process from September 2026 at the latest. Training will be provided by CAFRI through a combination of online and face-to-face delivery, which will also be available from September 2026 at the latest. I'll now pass you back to Paul.
Thank you, Francis. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the presentation of the Bovine Genetics Project, the Bovine Genetics Genotyping Scheme and the Bovine Genetics FSP Conditionality. I'm happy to take any questions and thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you. I remember getting a wee taste of this when we were up in Caffrey recently, and I genuinely think this could be of huge importance. But the significant amount of changes that farmers have been facing in terms of schemes and challenges has probably changed the space for negotiating change with farmers in Northern Ireland. How confident would you be that the communications and the confidence will be able to be transported into the farms where it's going to be needed, given the scale of this? Because I think you were saying it's only pedigree cattle really at the moment where this is held, so we're talking about probably 97%, 98% of the cattle in the country aren't in this at the moment and will need to move into it. So how advanced is that?
Yeah, I suppose the key thing is here, we recognise that this is a big project of work, but it's very much going to be industry-led and led by SRG, who've already engaged closely with the key players within the industry and across the industry. So we see them having a key role to ensure getting the communication out to farmers. Now, there hasn't been a lot of that communication to date, but that's where it links in terms of the training and support that we will be providing through CAFRI. We recognise the need to do that to ensure that we get a good uptake onto the programme. Okay,
so I think it indicated was it £16 per animal or something? Was it 13? 13. So that's £13 back. What is it going to cost the farmer to do the tissue test and to receive the tag or whatever that is? What does that anticipated to cost the farmer?
Okay, so in arriving at that figure of £13, we have a wide pre-market engagement across the industry. And that's what the benchmark has been set at as what's seen as being, across the suppliers as being a good estimate of the actual cost. So that will cover the cost.
So in terms of
delivery of that service.
in terms of applying confidence to that, if it was to cost more, how would the department react if in the rollout it cost the farmer more to engage in the scheme, and actually looked like it was going to cost them money?
Yeah, well that's what I say. We feel, based on our engagement that we have had to date, that we're at a level that, you know, the project will be able to deliver that. We don't see it exceeding that cost. Okay.
Is there any anticipated impact on the single farm payment or cross compliance?
No, there's no impact.
So in terms of the eligibility or not, so is it going to be a mandatory scheme or a participatory scheme? Voluntary scheme. Okay, with no impact on the single farm payment. Anticipated. Okay, this one, Francis, you might like this one because we were talking about the breeds, and I was trying to do this full circle of farm to the butcher's block as I was, and then into the restaurant. So there seems to be quite a significant breed list. Is there anything that's excluded that would be maybe controversial, or we're going to have our inboxes rattled by? Is it anticipated that there's an excluded list as opposed to the inclusive list?
No, all of the breeds that's currently in Northern Ireland are included there.
Okay. Okay, I've just got two more questions, if that's okay, and then we'll move to members, okay? So I note that discussions have been carried out through the Agricultural Policy Stakeholder Group, the APSG, which you did reference, and the Sustainable Ruminant Genetics to consider stakeholder reviews. Has the department come across any particular issues during these discussions, and if so, what steps have you had taken to allay any fears?
What's the biggest issue is just around the communication piece in terms of making the industry aware of what's actually involved in the programme. And I suppose that a lot of that feedback is coming back through SRG, but we propose to ramp that up over the next number of months, or in particular SRG to ramp that up over the next number of months.
And my final question, just before I bring members in, we did receive a written briefing from the Bovine Genetic Project in October last year. We noted that CAFRE proposed to deliver a suite of knowledge transfer and innovation programmes to ensure, now I know we touched on this in the first question, in terms of that knowledge transfer, which is going to be absolutely key. Can you tell us any more about the innovation programmes in particular, and any feedback you've received in those?
Okay, well, we're going to actually be presenting the innovation programmes to you next week in terms of an update on those, but we see that we will be setting up the likes of innovation farms that will be very much focused in around the whole bovine genetics piece, and there'll be potential for innovation visits as well to go away and look at all our regions and all our areas to see how they're delivering this type of programme. So there's two elements, or there's actually three. There's innovation partnerships as well in there. So
I've got one final one. I'm happy to have to come back to that next week. And this is final. This is my final. There was a cut-off date in terms of. I think I'm reading it wrong. It's about introduction to herd after 2027. Does that preclude then cattle that are brought in or transported into a herd? Does that mean the scheme won't be eligible to that line after that, or am I reading that wrong?
So really, in terms of the payment, it's for animals that are in your herd between the 1st of September 2026 and the 31st of December 2027. Yeah. We want to allow farmers the time from the 31st of December 2027 up until the 15th of May to allow them to send the genotype in and have that processed. So we'll make payment on all genotypes received up until the 15th of May 2028. Okay. So let's say we have a calf born the 31st of December 2027, we need to give time for those to be in. So as long as the animal has been in the herd during that period, 1st September 2026, 31st December 2027, if they have those genotypes in at any point up until the 15th of May 2028, we will make payment on those.
Another question. What is the how many cattle do we have? Cows, bulls? Many is there? Do you anticipate?
Well, in terms of the suckler herds, there's about 235,000 cows, and then their progeny, and then the dairy sector is over.
It's approximately 325,000 on the dairy side, and then all of their progeny coming through as well. So if we multiply the 13 divided by 16.6 million, you can see the.
Thank goodness for calculators. Thank you so much, Declan.
Thank you for that, and I certainly can see the benefit of it, and since we got a briefing back, I think it was earlier this year when the committee were down in Lavery as well. I just want to pick up on, you said it was a voluntary scheme, but then earlier in the presentation you said that farmers must do training or else their single farm payment will be penalised. So how is it voluntary if you'd be penalised?
Well, they don't have to. They don't have to join if they don't want to. You know, it's a personal decision whether they want to actually come into it.
They would be penalised if they didn't, is that right?
That would be the farm sustainability payment. There'd be a reduction on it if they don't actually come into the scheme.
So we maybe separate out two things. So we've got the genotyping scheme, which is a voluntary scheme, which is open to all. Okay, so any farm business can genotype their animals, and they will get the payment for that. The conditionality is around the training, which is not linked to the scheme, around the training for all of the information that's actually coming out of the portal, and in terms of registering for that portal. So there's a huge investment in here. As I said, we need to ensure that farmers access that information, but also complete the training. Okay, so the conditionality is not linked to the scheme. This scheme is separate from the conditionality. Okay.
And I'm just thinking, obviously, farmers are under a lot of pressure across all fronts at the minute. And would this be putting an added bureaucratic burden on farmers who are already hard pressed?
Well, we see that the benefits that this project would deliver will far outweigh, any additional work that a farmer has to do, to provide the information, because it's going to provide them with the genetic information that will, allow them to make better informed breeding decisions that hopefully will add value to their herd.
And finally, Chair, thanks for your indulgence. I certainly can see the complete merit in all of this, by the way. It's a good scheme. So the likes of, say, Teagasc in the south would be doing something similar there. Would you be able to avail of their data set as well to assist with this project, in terms of identifying the desirable traits, environmental, health, whatever, of animals, to expand effectively the data set that you have?
Yeah, well, I suppose there's two bits to it. There's the information coming out of, it's really through ICBF who collect and hold the data.
Yeah.
So because there's the same genetics, particularly in the beef population, used in the south of Ireland compared to Northern Ireland, we will be tapping into that information, but we're also going across to the UK and using the information that AHDB hold on the dairy population to help inform the breeding indexes there. So we're actually using across two jurisdictions.
Oh, yeah. No, it's just on the briefing notice that there was no direct comparisons in Britain, so I was wondering, that's why I didn't include that in my question. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. Can I very, very slightly confused here because it leads back into a question that I had asked in regard to any implications. It's just to hopefully bottom this one out in Saturday. So it's a totally voluntary scheme. By not volunteering to it, you're not excluding yourself from any other sustainability payment or single farm payment. That's there.
That's for the genotyping.
Yes, so it sits over here because there's obviously other schemes. So you're not excluded from participating in the scheme. But if you participate in the scheme and you don't complete the scheme, that's where the conditionality applies. Is that correct? Is my understanding?
There's maybe a bit of confusion here. The genotyping project, there's conditionality around the project, but the scheme is actually within the project. If you understand, the genotyping is one element within the overall genetic project.
Yes, which is a silo to.
But there's no conditionality attached to genotyping. There's no conditionality to genotyping. But now, to participate in the genetics project, you have to sign up for it and complete the training. And there's conditionality there. But in specific reference to genotyping, there's no conditionality yet. So you don't have to genotype.
Okay, I think Michelle's going to pick this one. I'll not flog this one too much because I'll do a bit more thinking. But yes, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation and for the presentation a couple of weeks ago in Cookstown. It was really interesting and informative. I still have confusion in relation to this, and if we're having confusion, then that's going to be mirrored outside. Now, I'm very positive about the whole concept of the bovine genetics genotyping. It was part of the much maligned going for growth strategy, which a number of parties have done a U-turn on in relation to. So I am positive about it, but I'm still concerned about the connections to conditionality. But I'm also concerned then at the end of this piece of legislation that then talks about reverting essentially to the rules on farm sustainability and with effect from the 1st of January 2028, the farm sustainability shall apply in relation to requirements about bovine genetics. So I need to know what that means.
Okay, so if we take the genetics project, which is the overarching project, okay, and within it you have an element of genotyping, okay, and we want to deliver genotyping to help inform the overall project. So if you take the overall project, we'd say, and there's conditionality to get farmers to sign up for that and to also do the training, because, and this is really with our industry engagement, to say farmers don't know a lot about this project, so you need to deliver training. So that's why we want farmers to do the training, so they better understand the project. But now if they want to do the genotyping piece, it is completely voluntary and there's no link to conditionality, that particular aspect of it. Where you're taking the tissue sample out of the ear, sending it away and getting a genetic evaluation carried out.
So I can get trained, I can register and I can get trained,
Yep.
but I don't actually need to submit any tissue or be part of anything further than that, and you won't touch my my payments.
No.
So I will be then subject to the 10% or the 15%
No.
non-compliance.
No. We want the industry to do the genotyping. We really want and that's where we want SRG to drive that on, because it'll deliver significant improvement.
Okay, and obviously you've met with the stakeholder group, and I raised this at Cookstown as well, because I'm not convinced that everyone is maybe on the same page as maybe has been articulated. So have you spoken to stakeholders again, and are they content with what is being presented here today?
Okay, so we have engaged with the Ag Policy Stakeholder Group, and there's a range of opinions coming from the various stakeholders, but the overall opinion from the stakeholder group is that they see the benefits of delivering this programme.
But there are still elements of that group who aren't content.
Yeah, no,
and are they the stakeholders who will be involved in carrying this out? Because obviously there's quite a range of stakeholders on that group, many who won't have farms or have livestock.
Okay. So yes, some of them aren't completely convinced, but they do see the merits of the programme.
Yeah, and as I said at the start, I'm very positive about this project. It's just I'm really concerned about it being linked to future payments.
The only thing I would say there is that the conditionality that we have put in place is, one, you need to register, and two, do the training is not that onerous on a farm business.
Yeah. I think that I'll leave it there at this point.
Right, I'm writing stuff down, the difference between a project and a programme. Could just outline before we bring William in. So the bovine genetics is the project. Then one of the programmes is the genotyping, which is the piece, which is the £13 per head. Mm-hmm. That's cost recovery. It's not an incentive really, but it helps everybody. For me, Francis, this is where I was sold on it. It offers that real gold standard of what we produce here, which we already know, but it actually gives us the evidence to say that. Could you outline anything else, just so I can separate this further, what's under the bovine genetic project? That is, no, the project's the bigger bit. Is the programme? Is the programme the bigger bit? Is the project?
Well,
I know it sounds like school, but this is, I think it's really important.
We'll call it the bovine genetics project.
Okay.
So within it, Francis, you maybe want to cover this.
So if we cover the project, I suppose in a nutshell, really what that is it's a data platform which is pulling together data from NIFAS, from livestock markets, from beef and dairy processors, which is allowing us to give farmers genetic merit information on their animals. Okay, so that's based on that data, and it's based on the lineage of the animals. But by collecting that data, we can also deliver a suite of benchmarking reports which are currently not available to farmers. So that's really to improve the productivity and environmental sustainability of the businesses. So if we take that as the project, and we're saying around the conditionalities, we want people to register for that project and to complete the training to understand the data that's coming out of it and to be able to use the information and act on that information on their farms. And there's probably a lack of knowledge around the project at the moment, so we really want to drive that. In terms of the genotyping scheme on the top of that is really where we're saying to improve the accuracy of the information that's actually in the database, we want to encourage you to genotype your animals. So we have the accuracy of the parentage, we can identify those genes which are currently hard to measure at farm level, such as myostatin gene around feed efficiency and so on, and that really drives the rate of genetic gain. So genotyping is a key component, and that's why we're paying for it. Okay, so if we say we've got the genetics project, that will always be available to farmers. Okay. But the genotyping is an added, as you say, added benefit on top of that, where we want to incentivise farmers to come into that, and there's full cost recovery in that.
It's cost, but I don't think it's incentivising. I think it's cost recovery,
yes.
And then the cost recovery leaves me a wee bit of a nervousness that if it's no incentive, it's cost recovery, which is fine. The conditionality that may lead to a reduction in a payment for that part, is that reduction going to be the cost recovery piece, or does that eat into the farm payment? Is it, what am I trying to get to? Is there a risk by participating in the scheme more than the value of the scheme itself to the farmer?
Definitely not.
Definitely not.
There's no risk to the farmer of participating in the scheme. Okay, so around the genotyping scheme, if an animal is genotyped, the farmer gets his paid. Okay, so there's no conditionality attached to that whatsoever.
What I'm going to say to the members just this on this point, because it does come up with a few members. Before I move on to William, I'm going to invite. We'll try and kill this.
Can I answer a point that was made before a member leaves? I think the member is leaving, and I'm keen to do it in the interest of openness, and I'll do it only with your permission, of course. But it would probably take me to my question as well. So,
I'll give you the right to reply. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. First of all, can I answer in relation to Michelle's question a couple of questions ago? Cheap jibes about going for growth won't wash with me, and I will answer. I need no reminder that there are those who are not particularly open-minded about things that are new to them, or things that are being reviewed, things that don't represent their views or don't represent their thinking. And the only proof I need of that is played out twice weekly at least in an increasingly toxic assembly chamber. I make no apology as someone who cares about the environment and the future of our environment that processes and policies and programmes such as Going for Growth could be reviewed, particularly when they're shown to have a detrimental impact on our environment. It's a no-brainer to some of us, but clearly a major challenge for others. But going back to this point, and I had a question on the clarification around the training on the impact on the conditionality, but I think you've more or less answered that. And if there's anything further to say on the component of the training on the conditionality, I'm very happy to hear it, but it seems to have been clarified for me. The only other question I had was around the lead-in time for this. There seems to have been a considerable lead-in time from, is it December 2022? December 21 to February 2022, there was a consultation done. What was the delay in getting to the decision in December 24? Was that absence of government or consultation with the sector?
I suppose it was a significant project of work, and just it took a significant amount of time just to arrive at a final decision around it. But we have made significant progress since. There's a large piece of work in terms of going out for the whole procurement of the service provider, so that just takes time.
Okay, understandable.
Enough, John?
Okay.
Thank you. And just in terms of, I will do business committee, I think it was fair to give John right of reply there in regards to that, although to be fair to Michelle, she referred to parties as opposed, but I understand the context because I'm in the chamber and I get it. You can give it to Daniel outside.
Get open to review.
No, I think it's fair enough. I think, look, listen, we're going to be a robust committee because we are going to offer scrutiny. I'm not afraid to allow you to do this now and again, but we've got a really important piece of business in front of us today too. So returning to that piece then, young William. And William has already declared an interest, by the way, just in case.
Yeah, I've already declared an interest in a farmer myself, but I mean, I think the scheme's a good idea. Proven genetics is good, it can only be good. I do think you need something to farmers can be set in their ways. You might need something to incentivise farmers. You do say a wee bit of confusion around penalty out of your single farm payment. I still am confused a little. You must do the training, is that right? Mm-hmm. Right? So if you do the training, even you don't participate in the scheme, there's no penalty, is that right?
Yet.
Wouldn't that be... There's older people and older farmers might need some encouragement to participate in the scheme. Farmers could lose money out of their single or sustainability payment due to their lack of knowledge, or they would need some encouragement, I think.
I suppose, William, and it's a fair point, we recognise, the age profile of farmers out there, and that's where we have, and the delivery of this project is very much being seen as being industry-led, and that's where we have engaged with Sustainable Ruminant Genetics, where they are actually in the process of recruiting a couple of staff. They're going to be there to provide that support to farm businesses, and in the back of that, that's where we want to deliver this training programme, and we're going to do it in such a way that it will be delivered at a time and place that it actually suits the farmers, so there'll be an opportunity of both face-to-face and online delivery of that training. But as I say, the key bit here is engagement with the industry and getting the industry to take an actual lead in the delivery of the project. We see being critical.
Isn't that a big undertaking in one foul sweep to get everybody in? Should there not be a lead-in period?
Well, there's a lead-in period now, because we're not actually going to start delivering the project until September 2026. So there's a lead-in period now over the next number of months to start to ramp up that communication around the project, and that's where SRG have a key role to take in the delivery of that.
See, the cost is 16.6 million. Is that per year or total?
That's in total. That's in total to deliver the project based on the total number of livestock that we want to genetically profile, and based on an individual cost per animal of £13.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Slight bit of confusion returned to me there. If you don't participate in the project completely, does that have an impact on your...
That's the condition. There is a conditionality around that.
That's the condition. This is not... So it's still voluntary, but...
The genotyping is voluntary. The genotyping is voluntary, but you have to participate in the project. And as we've said, that's really register for the project and do the training, which is really upskilling you. And what is this about? So what sort of reports am I going to get out of this? How is this going to benefit my business? How can I use this report to actually make informed decisions in my farm to add value to the business?
As William pointed out, the most important part of this is the communications at the start and giving people the confidence. Okay, thank you very much. I think you're hearing from every member so far. We like it, but the mechanisms we know are very hard to deliver. Okay, we have then Aoife.
Yep. Given the high rates of BTB in the north, how will the new bovine genetics scheme identify and support breeding of animals most resistant to BTB?
Francis, you maybe?
Yeah, so we want to deliver a genetic merit on animals on the resistance to TB, and we know there's like a 12% variation when animals are exposed to TB that actually contract it compared to those that are actually resistant. So really what we want to do is we want to provide farmers with the information to identify those animals which are most resistant and to be able to breed from them. We're not going to solve the TB problem with it, but we're going to, it's going to allow farmers to make some progress in terms of those animals that's resistant. I suppose the key benefit of genetics is that when you make those gains, they're cumulative and they're locked in, so they're there. Okay.
Thank you. That's all.
Yeah,
thanks.
Okay, Mr. McCrossan.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry I'm late. I had a Planning Appeals Commission meeting this morning, which was unavoidable. And one thing I enjoy more than this committee is fighting with DFA officials. But just a few questions, and that might have been answered, and if they are, just correct me. So just in terms of the 16.6 million, how much of that will reach farm businesses versus administrative costs?
That's all the cost to go to farm businesses. So that's based on each animal that's tagged. There'll be a £13 the farmer will get back. So that's all the costs. And then you ramp that up with the number of animals. So all that money will go back to farm businesses.
Okay, that's positive. And and this may have been clarified as well, will the scheme be voluntary initially or compulsory from the outset?
That's we have two elements. So the project.
Don't open that one again. I'm only joking. The fight was over. You need to get the
genetics project. So if you have to take part in the project. So you have to register and you have to do the training. To do genetic profiling, which is an element of that, is not voluntary. You don't have to, or it's not mandatory. You don't have to do that, but you have to register for the scheme and do the training, because we recognise there's a lack of awareness about this programme, and that's why we want that conditionality in there.
Okay, I'm just making sure I don't make you repeat yourself the third time. So what specific health, productivity and emissions reductions are forecast by year 3 of the rollout?
Without getting into specific details around the percentages and the exact data on that, but I suppose the first 5 years is really about establishing the baseline, okay? But in terms of animal health, I've already mentioned that the TB, but there's other genes that we can identify, such as myostatin, which is like a double muscle gene, which is associated with harder calvings, so we can identify that. But really what we want to do here is by providing this information to farmers are breeding animals which are more efficient, okay? And by animals being more efficient and more productive, those animals that slaughter at a younger age, that calve earlier and calve more often, that automatically leads to lower emissions from those animals. We have specific targets within the business case, and we can provide them with you afterwards. But ultimately, hand in hand with the productivity is a reduction in terms of greenhouse gas emissions too.
Okay. And Chair, just finally, just another question. Can CAFRE and local labs process samples to maximise the local economic benefit?
In CAFRE process? No, we can't. We don't have the skills or the resources. So there's specialists in this area. But what we have done, we've gone out with a pre-market engagement, and we've set the standard of what's required. So if you want to be a lab that's doing the genetic profiling, you have to meet a certain standard. And we've went out and done that pre-market engagement bit, and there's a number of labs across Northern Ireland and wider that have expressed an interest in this project. So.
Okay, and very finally, just with data, and we live in a world sensitive of data, and there's all sorts of issues. What protections exist for farmers whose data will be stored in the NIFAIS?
Okay, but I suppose it's the same process as in place at the moment for around the protection of the data. The data that's lifted off farm still remains the ownership of the farmer. Okay.
Content, members? As far as you can be a decision. Okay, thank you very much, members. Okay, thank you for your participation. We're now going to put the question to the committee. So members, are you agreed that the department proceed to make the SR? If you do, we will then consider it in due course, subject to the ASR report. Before you go, have you any indication of when the Minister is likely to want to make the ASR?
Yes, we want to make it in advance of December this year.
In advance of what, sorry?
In advance of December, so it will be by the end of this year.
Okay, thank you. Members, okay, so are you agreed that the department proceed to make the ASR? If not, could you give me some rationale around that? And we will return to consider it in due course, regardless of that. So, yes.
I've said my piece in regards to the project itself. I'm positive about it, but I still think there needs to be some more clarification, and I would like some time maybe to have conversations with those stakeholders who maybe have raised concerns in relation to that. And I would suggest perhaps that members of the committee, if they don't want to meet in formal session, that those who want to meet with the UFU do so, in order just to be clear as to where they are, because obviously they're going to be very much required to lead on this project as well as the SRG. So.
Okay, I've just one comment. What would help me really good, because I'm like a picture type of guy, a flow chart that I think we're in a good place in regard to the payments and that type of stuff. But is there the potential that you could supply a bit of a flow chart to separate that out so that we can see it very, very clearly, because there's nothing that speaks like a picture on a page, and anything to do with like the cross compliance and the payments, and that would give me confidence. So at this stage, I'm with you, Michelle. That's the piece I need confidence on before we're just making the SR. Minister will bring it anyway. John, do you want to come in?
Yeah, can I clarify, we're taking the decision now or not?
I'm asking the committee, so there's reluctance so far, but we'll take a...
I'm happy to take the decision.
Yeah, we'll take a vote on it.
I'm not so happy about deferring the decision.
Well, the SR is not imminent, to be fair, John. It's not coming until about December. The Minister wants to make it in December, so it's not as if we're a rush here.
I'm aware of that, but we're nearly into October, and you'll have seen earlier on the meeting accused.
We've kind of been here before in regards to these, to be fair, with the SRs, where they come late. This is not a late one, so thank you for that, and I think it'd be worthy given the questions from my perspective. I'm happy to put it to the vote.
Okay, look, if we include the questions from your perspective rather than some process where people were informal meetings was mentioned a moment ago, I wouldn't be content with that being a formal record. No issue with people having informal meetings whatsoever. I might have one myself, but if we can put a more business-like definition on the deferral, I'm perfectly happy.
Okay, I think so. In regards to this, certainly happy to take on board any propositions that any members make in regard to what we do. This SR is not likely to be laid before December-ish.
Yeah.
It's obviously not a target, but
essentially we need it through by December.
And the sooner you get it through, the sooner it allows you to get out and do the information pieces. I get that. So, members, in that regard, we actually don't need to take a decision on it until we see it anyway, until it's closer. But I follow up on the point. If my ask is if we could have some kind of a flowchart just to set those out much more clearly, and that'll be a publicly available document. The Deputy Chair.
Yeah, it would probably be useful to have that space to get a bit more information from the APSG, who were leading in this, and from the SRG as well. I think
we could raise this. We could raise the queries then, and through the clerk a series of questions if you want to communicate that by that means. I think it's more efficient at the moment given the forward work plan, but reserve the right, obviously, as the committee does, to invite people. But I think certainly we could write to them in the first instance and any questions.
That's not their own individual parties or members,
And I'm going to ask William in this first.
You're okay.
You were smiling, Michelle.
I still have some concerns that elderly small farmers that end up maybe not realising, don't do the training, could find themselves find it as sustainability payment. That would be a concern I would have, and I think we need a wee bit more time to look at this. Yeah.
Michelle, did you want to come in there?
It's just in relation to the PSG, and we've been down this route before, and then we get a general email coming back from them, and whenever we know that there are stakeholders within that group who have concerns, and those may be the same stakeholders that we need to lead on this project. So I'm just cautioning in and around that.
I don't want to dilute the value of the APSG because I think it is useful. However, as members, we all know that we are lobbied by concerned stakeholders anyway, so we can pick that up through our parties in that respect, if that's okay. So just need to be clear with the clerk here. So you guys are free to go, if that's okay. And if my request is the flowchart piece. Has anybody else any specific request? William's piece, I think, is useful, just that comms piece for elder farmers. And we know, and as you picked up, Francis, there is, I think it was Francis, maybe it was yourself, the age of our farmers is older than some other industries.
No, there's a big role here to play around the communication.
Yeah.
We recognise that.
Some confidence in the strategy, William?
Yeah, but whenever they get their sustainability payment and they see 10 or 20%, you understand it's too late then at that stage for them,
Well, that flowchart will help us with that too. Okay? Thank you. And then we're going to talk about this a wee bit more. Guys, thank you very much. Okay, guys, I just want to be very clear for the clerk here in regards to where we are. We haven't put the question because I think we're agreed that there's a bit more scrutiny for us to do on this, either individually in our own parties, certainly as a committee. The SR hasn't been laid yet, so we've got a little bit of time, and we should take the time to consider all aspects. So in terms of, you can tend to the department of two things we've asked them verbally, and we can follow it up by writing to the department, which is my question around seeking a simple flow chart of regard to the payments and the cross compliance. If there aren't any, see it separated out. Secondly, your piece about the comms piece, particularly in elder farmers, and what that's going to look like. Is there anything else for the department? And then we'll just look for a response from the ASPG in regards to that at this stage.
I suppose the concern that I do have is that if you have livestock, you are going to be subject to a threat on your future payment because of what's being implemented here. If you're an arable farmer, you don't have that threat. So in some ways, actually, there's an unfairness around how conditionality is being applied to livestock farmers in the first instance. So I do have a concern in relation to that too.
Well, I think that's why we moved away from the word of incentive to cost recovery too. It's not an incentive because it just covers.
There's a threat to their future payment, be that 10% and then up to 15%, which can then be applied by virtue of the fact that they feel that they don't want to get involved in a scheme.
Yeah, okay, and I think that's hopefully what the flow chart will set out very, very simply, because I think that's what we were.
And I suppose the second part of that will be that while at this point it is voluntary, there's a likelihood that once this now gets into place, that it will then become mandatory. Yep. And that will require then sort of future threats to future payments. So
if the uptake is smaller than they anticipate, they may have to use a stick.
So
this only works if there is a full uptake, really.
So while I'm very, very positive about the project, I'm concerned about the implications that it will have.
Okay. Anything else, members?
That's fine.
Clark, have you any questions? Are you happy enough? ASPG for an update where they are with it, any concerns and that type of stuff?
I can include some of these concerns in a letter to. What about the SRD?
We'll get sight of that letter, guys, for next week as well.
Do you want me to bring that back?
We'll bring it back next week. Okay, we have a bit of space. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Can we take a short break?
Okay, we're going to take a very, very short break.
Yeah.
Please, a very short break. Want to start no later than 12:05. That's a very generous 7 minutes, guys. We good? Okay. I want to thank the ESR for her evidence session in order to assist our scrutiny of the SL1, which are on pages 57 and 64 of your pack for the SL1, the draft SR and the explanatory memorandum. We heard earlier that the ESR is content with the approach the department has in this instance and has given us some clarification around that. And so, members, happy enough? We need to go here. We're happy here.
Yep, can tell.
During our question and answer session with the official last week, we asked if the department could provide examples of operationality when the department may experience difficulty going forward making new regulations under the 1949 Act. We're still awaiting that response, but I think we've got confidence in around there, and we'll work with the department on that. It's a qualitative piece of work. So, members, are you now agreed that the department proceed to make the SR, and we will then consider it in due course? Content?
Yep.
Thank you, members. Okay. Okay, members, now we go to agenda item 12, which is the Dilapidation Bill, oral evidence session by the Research and Information Service. So I refer you to pages 225 to 283 of the briefing paper, providing an overview of the bill and identifying errors within the bill which may merit further consideration and, where relevant, compare similar provisions within GB and Ireland. For reference, the bill and explanatory memorandum start at page 284 of the pack. So I now welcome the amazing Suzie Cave from RAISE to the meeting and invite her to brief the committee. Thank you, Suzie.
Thank you, Chair. So I appreciate that this is quite a hefty paper, so I'll do my best to keep it as brief and concise. So, yes, the purpose of today is just to give you a briefing on the Dilapidation Bill, its context, the key provisions and areas for potential scrutiny. Now, the bill aims to modernise and consolidate powers for Northern Ireland councils to address dilapidated, dangerous or neglected buildings and sites, replacing fragmented and outdated laws. Now, just in terms of a bit of background and the rationale, section 2 of the paper looks at the current situation in relation to the fact that town centres and some rural areas suffer from derelict or vacant buildings, undermining regeneration and local amenity. Now, existing legislation is outdated, some dating back to the 19th century. It's limited in scope and inconsistently applied. Section 2.2 provides examples of some of these existing legislation, and it outlines some of the main limitations of it. Now, as confirmed by the Minister in the second stage debate, there is also no clear inventory of affected properties, and the scale of the problem is not fully quantified. This again is picked up throughout the paper in later stages, but I'll just move on to section 3 in relation to the bill development, particularly the consultation and associated assessments. Now, the consultation was conducted back in 2016 and it presented 4 options. 1, do nothing. 2, the production of non-statutory guidance. 3, a bill to amend and consolidate existing legislation. However, it would not involve the introduction of new regimes from other jurisdictions or the extension of the existing local acts. And then the 4th option was a new bill to introduce a new broader regime. And this would include elements of the existing legislation and from other jurisdictions. And this was the department's preferred option. From the consultation, there was strong support from councils for option 4. Stakeholders were clear that they wanted robust cost recovery, clear guidance and protection for heritage sites. Concerns were raised about the consistency of the use of provisions across councils, the funding and cost recovery if owners are unknown. Now, the associated regulatory impact assessment explored 4 options, and of note were options 3 and 4, to provide a new regime with or without financial support from Northern Ireland Executive. Option 3, which was to provide without financial support, was the Department's preferred option. The explanatory memorandum considered other aspects such as the financial effects on the Department, human rights, equality and rural needs, of which there were no concerns or significant impacts highlighted by the Department. Next section, I'll just move into some of the observations and considerations that have been highlighted in relation to this. And one is really the date of the consultation, which was done back in 2016. Also, whether the Department feels the responses received to both the consultation and the draft RIA, which did receive 1 response, is representative of the range of potential industries impacted by the provisions. And as suggested under option 4 of the RIA, is government funding still up for consideration? And does the bill provide for phased commencement of provisions as it was suggested in the consultation? I'll move on now really to the bulk of the paper, which looks at the key provisions of the bill. It takes a thematic approach in terms of the types of notices, the cost recovery aspects, guidance, heritage and regulations. Each section provides an overview of the provisions and specific considerations. It also provides examples of similar provisions from elsewhere, some of which the bill provisions have been based on. So just briefly, if we look at the different types of notices, and there's a hierarchy. For low-level neglect under a maintenance notice, for serious disrepair under a dilapidation notice, dangerous buildings through a dangerous structure notice, immediate risks under emergency action powers, and for health or nuisance issues under a defective premises notice. Now, in relation to all of these notices, council powers, councils can require remedial action or demolition at the discretion of the council to carry out works themselves if the owner fails to act. Cost recovery is through direct charges, land charges, or sale of materials, and there's no guaranteed central government funding. In terms of discretionary powers, powers are discretionary and not mandatory. Councils can choose whether to act, depending on the resources and cost recovery risk, or whether to enforce through offence. Provisions in relation to the different types of notices are similar to those provided in England and Wales, as detailed in the table in section 4.1.2. Just in terms of some of the considerations in this respect, they're made in terms of the operation of the provisions and comparison with other jurisdictions. Some of these include, and I'll not go through them all because there are quite a number of questions there listed. An interested person upon which a notice may be served is defined in clause 24 as owner and or occupier. But what constitutes an occupier, as the face of the bill does not appear to provide further detail on this? What criteria will councils use to prioritise sites? For example, what constitutes low-level neglect, serious disrepair, etc.? Will this be left to council's own discretion or set in the statutory guidance? Also, if practical operations are not clear on the face of the bill, will these be provided in detail in the guidance? For example, how are councils to determine what constitutes detrimental and seriously detrimental to the amenity? If this is to be determined by councils in relation to a maintenance notice and a defective premises notice, will this be provided in guidance? Some of the timeframes may be of interest for further consideration. Council may carry out works, for example, after 9 days from a defective premises notice takes effect. Does this give an owner time to respond? What timeframes for completion of a notice will there be? Will this be set out in the guidance? And what flexibility will be offered? Will there be exemptions? Will this be left to the discretion of the Council, and could this create inconsistencies? Members may wish to explore the fines available under the provisions and whether they are enough of a deterrent, particularly with regards to repeat offences. Some of the other jurisdictions provide for repeat offences, such as in England and Wales and Ireland. In fact, the Isle of Man has a daily penalties determined by the court. Is this something that has been considered by the Department? Also, how do the powers and actions under a defective premises notice under Clause 11 work alongside the Department for Communities Defective Premises Act 2024? Could there be potential for overlap or confusion? And what about a register similar to the derelict sites register in Ireland that's kept by local authorities? Would this help with continued monitoring on operation and the effectiveness and costs of the legislation? The next section of the paper looks at cost recovery, and particularly section 4.2. Councils can recover costs directly from owners, but challenges may exist if owners are unknown or untraceable. A charge or notice can be registered on land, allowing costs to be recovered through sale, including forced sale, or binding the new owner to the conditions of a notice. And materials from demolition can also be sold to offset costs. A number of considerations have been made in relation to the proposals and examples from other jurisdictions, and some of these include: will the council's charge on land have priority over any other charges, such as mortgage? Could there be legal issues and delays? Will there be any form of assistance should cost recovery provisions not be sufficient to some councils? Were local authority vesting powers in these scenarios ever discussed or considered, similar to powers under the Derelict Sites Act in Ireland, 1990? At what level of debt can enforced sale be used? For example, in Hart District Council, draft guidance suggests the debt must exceed £1,000 and the property be empty for more than 6 months. The Derelict Sites Act in Ireland also has the Derelict Sites Levy, where urban land entered on the Derelict Sites Register, owners must pay an annual levy of 7% of its market value to the local authority. And is this something that the Department has explored? In terms of heritage protection, Clause 17, councils must consult with planning and heritage bodies before issuing notices on heritage sites. Members may wish to seek clarification on whether the definition of a heritage site focuses mainly on just land and listed buildings, and whether it does include non-listed historic buildings, such as vernacular buildings and those in conservation areas. Now, in terms of guidance, this really does cover quite a large part of the bill, and Section 4.4 considers this. Clause 20 requires councils and their officers to follow official guidance from the Department when using their powers. Any new or revised guidance must be presented to the Assembly before it takes effect. The guidance will be important. For example, if a council issues a notice without following the guidance, it can be a valid reason for appeal. The Department will develop the guidance with input from local councils and aims to have a draft ready for review alongside the bill, and members may wish for an update on this. In terms of other considerations, members may wish to explore whether the guidance provides clarity and meaning to certain terms not defined on the face of the bill. For example, one of them is amenity, which, according to best practice guidance for local authorities in England, there is difficulty in defining amenity. It may mean different things to different areas, and there's further detail on this provided in the blue box in section 4.4. Members may wish to clarify whether the guidance will aim to ensure consistency of approach across councils in relation to procedures and approaches under the bill, such as a test to quantify the level of neglect of dilapidated buildings, procedures for enforced sale. What is the process for making changes to guidance? How often could this happen? And will consultation with councils happen with every change? Also, to consider whether definitions and criteria are best placed on the face of the bill or in the guidance. In terms of the next section, this is looking at regulations that are to be produced under the bill, and this is section 4.6. The bill provides provisions for the development of regulations by the Department. Some will use draft affirmative procedure, for example, for fixed penalty amounts, definition of a heritage site, amending a statutory provision. However, fees for exercising powers in relation to dangerous structure notices or emergency action are through negative resolution. Members may wish for more detail on this and whether they are happy with the level of scrutiny afforded. So just moving on to section 5 of the paper. In summary, this really looks at some of the key areas that might need further exploration or consideration. And support and cross-departmental coordination may be needed as well to ensure that the bill is practical, fair and effective. Areas for further consideration may include the bill's discretionary nature, its financial model and scope. Members may wish to explore the discretionary aspect of the bill and whether a more mandatory approach would be beneficial to ensure uniform enforcement across councils versus the resource implications of mandatory powers without funding support. The Minister stated at second stage that this could be considered further. There are questions around the scope of the bill, particularly regarding neglected sites. Although referenced in the consultation, they don't appear to be mentioned or defined on the face of the bill. In terms of amenity and housing, it's been suggested that the bill focuses on external appearance, not internal use or housing reuse. However, the Minister during second stage suggested that as part of the committee's scrutiny, it may want to consider how the bill may interact with provisions for housing. And the blue box on page 275 of your pack provides an example from Hart District Council, who used its powers to bring a derelict bungalow back into use. Another area in terms of the scope of the bill are the rural aspects. It has been suggested that the bill is more urban focused, raising concerns about rural properties being overlooked. Also, public estate. Members may wish to clarify whether the bill applies to publicly owned buildings and whether councils can recover costs from government departments. The paper also mentions the use of community asset transfer and whether this is something that could be explored for both publicly and privately owned land or properties. Another aspect is in terms of fake shop fronts. Does the bill provide for opportunities to address these where they are not seen as a remedy for dilapidation? And then lastly, the financial implications. Throughout the second stage debate, many concerns were raised about the financial implications of the bill. These were mostly in terms of the costs on councils, businesses and owners, and the lack of grants or financial assistance offered that could result in the potential for disparity across Northern Ireland council areas. The financial model is based on 2018 data, estimating remediation costs at £4 million annually, averaging £7.3 thousand per property. However, this is outdated and there's no clear picture of how many properties will be affected and whether the department has plans to update this. During the second stage debate, it was stated that long-term increases in property values will offset costs. However, how robust is this claim, particularly in rural or struggling areas, and what work has been done to explore or support this? Questions are asked around whether there will be any form of flexibility or support for small or struggling businesses and individuals who haven't the means to undertake remedial action. Other areas for consideration mentioned include the cross-cutting nature of the bill and whether the DAERA Minister has had correspondence with other ministers on issues such as rates relief and housing aspects. Chapter 6 of the paper moves on to looking at how some of the similar legislative powers have been used in other jurisdictions, and this is primarily within England. 6.1.1 looks at the town and country planning powers under section 215. This allows local authorities to serve notices similar to a maintenance notice under the bill. Research from 1999 showed that 80% of notices resulted in compliance, with only 6 to 8% of notices requiring council intervention. The next section looks at emergency action and compensation. A case study from Hastings Borough Council from 2006 illustrates some of the risks of using emergency powers, similar to the powers in the bill, in which allows a council to act immediately. In this example, the council closed Hastings Pier due to safety concerns, Businesses affected sought compensation due to the use of the emergency powers. The council lost its appeal due to not following due process. In this case, it was because the claimants were not considered as the cause of the problem. So this highlights the legal and financial risks council may face when using emergency powers. In a similar way, emergency powers under the Dilapidation Bill may be used, and members may wish to seek clarity on safeguards, such as what constitutes reasonably practicable in relation to notifying owners, how compensation claims will be assessed and managed, and whether councils may be reluctant to use the powers due to potential legal risks. I'm just going to leave it there. I am aware that there is draft guidance which is still in development, and it might be useful to cross-reference that with some of the issues that have been raised in this paper once the finalised version of the draft comes to fore. As I say, it's quite a hefty paper. I sort of sped through it there, and if there's some other areas that you want to discuss or have questions on, I'm happy to do so.
No bother. Thank you very much. Very, very well set out in a comprehensive piece there. And as you've rightly pointed out, there's still under development. I think that they're still working on it. There, just from my perspective, there's just a couple of areas of concern. One, that Bill clearly sets out at the start, a council may. So this will be totally discretionary in any council whether to administer the powers. The must only kicks in as and when they decide. My concern with that is the appetite for that piece of work that any council might take. So it's not just the rural, you rightly picked out the rural disparity that potentially exists, which is something we'll be very concerned about and very focused on as a committee, but each of us do represent other areas with urban, and councils do take the different attitude, each council has a different attitude to risk and fight in these matters. And I would hope that we might be able to assist in that and maybe add a wee bit more powers to the paper, because I know now I haven't done the legislative debates, and when we see the word may in there, I need real confidence in there to try and bottom that out and say, is this worth doing at all? If at the start of the thing it just says, well, if you like, basically, because that's what may means in most instances. And but that's only from my perspective. I got one question, and it's and I know we'll get back here anyway, is in regard to listed buildings. It's further on down the piece, but in regard to, do you envisage any complexity in dealing with heritage sites or listed buildings, given that there is a likely crossover with other departments? Or is that reasonably well set out, do you think, in the legislation?
The legislation on the face of the bill is quite light in terms of yes, they have to consult with DFC, who has responsibilities for listed buildings. But even just in terms of the scope of that, are we dealing with just listed buildings, or is that going broader and wider to historic buildings that aren't necessarily listed as such? And that's one of the concerns that had been raised in the consultation as well. I suppose that's maybe something for the department to tease out with DFC as well. I understand that it's potentially, because they already have registered listed buildings, it's something that is easier to follow up with DFC, but trying to get an idea of all historic buildings as well could be something that's more complicated and complex, and whether that would be something that warrants more detail within the guidance.
I think we're trying to be helpful here with our councils too, because our high streets are devoid of pedestrians and customers these days, and this is part of that drive, I suppose, to work with councils to try and get people back in there. Have any of the other members any other queries? Declan, yeah.
Chair, thank you, and Suzie, thank you for your very detailed paper as always. So you see in your when you were researching this, what has there been any consultation or any views expressed by NILGA or Solus in relation to this, in terms of particularly the resource implications for councils?
Looking back to the consultation and the responses that were provided, or the overview of responses, the detail that seemed to come through was that it was coming from local councils. Now, whether that was produced through SOLAS or NILGA, the actual responses don't clarify that, but that's tends to be the way sometimes, just a summary of responses, and it refers to local government in general, local councils in general. So that's maybe something to clarify with the department officials.
Jed. And Suzie, just again, your search, this is an issue that, in my mind, sits more neatly within communities. You know, it's a regeneration, mostly urban regeneration. How does it end up in DAERA?
That is a very good question. It's probably not something that I can answer. I'd be referring back to the old DOE days when a lot of those things and I'd be getting confused. Yeah. But it is certainly, especially whenever you look at the DFC Act that on defective premises as well, and we have a defective premises notice within this piece of legislation, and so even if there is merit for it to be sitting in with DAERA, there are aspects that maybe could cause confusion and overlap with DFC and some of their responsibilities in legislation.
Thank you, Suzie. Next chair.
Thank you. William?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In relation to dilapidated buildings, does that take in rural buildings or not? Because there is a danger in that there's old disused farmhouses that never be lived in again, and they're only there maybe as used as a replacement site or something like that. I think it'd be wrong if they come into play, because no one's going to repair those beyond repair.
Certainly. I mean, on the face of the bill, there's a lot of areas that need a bit more detail as to what it applies to. Again, that is something that might be provided within the draft guidance, but until we see the final version of that, I wouldn't be wanting to comment on its state as it is right now in terms of the guidance.
We need to keep a close eye on that, because rating of empty homes, actually, some old farmhouses in the middle of a farmyard that nobody's lived in for years, actually fell into the trap of rating of empty properties, which wasn't the idea behind the scheme, but they fell into the trap, and it was difficult for some of them. They had to pay large rates on some properties that are never going to be lived in again, so it's important that there's not some victims that falls into that some people out in the countryside that there's those old dilapidated buildings that are never going to be lived in again don't fall into this trap.
Because there are examples in other jurisdictions where they remove the rates relief as a deterrent for dilapidation as well. So it's getting that balance.
Yeah.
Okay. William and
Thanks very much, Chair. Just a couple of things. I shared with Declan and a number of others who said it is a bit confusing. There's a blurred line almost as to why this has ended up with this particular department and not communities, because in terms of enforcement, not that that's very effective at all actually, but in terms of enforcement for listed or historical buildings, it falls under communities, isn't that right? And whilst they turn up at a meeting, they say straight away before you even get your words out of your mouth, we have no money, and there's no follow-up to anything at all. And we've seen, and Declan and I could speak to this because we've seen quite a number of historic buildings in the wider West Tyrone area that have just fallen into such a state of disrepair, and ultimately then antisocial behaviour takes place and they end up burned and destroyed altogether because there wasn't proper intervention at an earlier stage, particularly when there's the means to do so, privately or otherwise. Just in relation to the council, this is just to ensure this doesn't fall between the cracks, but what resources will the councils be given to ensure that they can effectively remedy some of these issues? Otherwise, we're just going to have a bill that has good intentions, but actually nothing to resource councils to effectively deal with the problem.
Well, the RIA listed the department's preferred option as the version of a new bill without funding support from the Northern Ireland Executive. The Minister did state in second stage that is something that is open for consideration or further discussion, particularly at committee stage. Also, in terms of the use of the powers, which yes, they are discretionary, I mean, a council can decide whether to take direct action through remediation or through charging offences and penalties. So there's that option as well. And, you know, that's for probably councils to decide whether it's worth the risk of doing the actual activity versus enforcement action.
Yeah, so it's without teeth is the problem, because councils have no money. We're listening to, you know, Oma Fermanagh is in my area, Derry and Strabane is in my area, and continually we're told that resources are tight, there's no money, and ultimately this will fall to the ratepayer, which will ultimately increase the burden on them in a cost of living crisis. That's why I'm concerned about where this bill sits. So in effect it'll have good enough intentions, but when it comes down to it, councils may not actually duly enforce because there's not resources in place to do so. So why would the council do that?
There are options for charging of fees for some of their services as well, and that has been suggested as a way to try and recover costs, but it's that initial outlay. You can't, you know, it's the risk of not being guaranteed.
Yeah, but often when it comes to, not in all cases, you know, in some cases there's just people that are quite tight and don't spend money on their premises. But in other aspects, there's buildings that have fallen between the cracks that have been repossessed by a bank, say, and they're sitting in a state of limbo that are sold on or whatever. It just doesn't. It doesn't seem to be going to resolve anything, in my opinion. You know, unless there's resources there for the council to duly deal with the thing. If there's no one there, you know, Sion Mill's mill is sitting there in a terrible state. It could have been salvaged if there had been proper action taken a number of years ago by the council, by the Department for Communities or whatever. But because they've no teeth to deal with the actual thing, that nothing's been done, and the building's just continually falling into disrepair as a result, and it has no owner. The director of the company is deceased, so it's sitting in a state of limbo. That's an example, I'm saying, of you know, how is this going to resolve anything is really the question if they haven't got the resources.
And I suppose detail as well is to come within the guidance, and whether that will provide the different opportunities for, you know, councils to try and establish an owner. But again, you know, that's the costs, the outlay, if they're having to conduct investigations or bring somebody external in to help identify an owner.
Yeah, it's also a bit of a strange one, because town centres are seeing more and more dereliction because, for a number of reasons, the significant cost of rates is putting people out of business, and ultimately then buildings are lying in a derelict state. And this is happening in towns and villages, and to touch on William's point about more rural towns and villages as well. You know, if Derry and Strabane or Oman Fermanagh were to embark on enforcement for the number of derelict properties that are in terrible state, it would bankrupt the council.
And just
and they wouldn't have the resources to go around it all anyway.
Just in response to your question about where it sits within some of the existing legislation, I mean, one of them is the Clean Neighbourhoods Act, which sits under the remit of DAERA, and there's quite a lot of the aspects of this which is just extending and allowing for a quicker process that would normally be being applied under the Clean Neighbourhoods Act. So, and it's also extending it to, rather than just being seen as a statutory nuisance, but this idea of visual amenity. So, again, it was one of the questions that I had asked about the just amendments of existing legislation rather than it sitting under a separate bill as such. Again, that's, you know, for drafters to be able to explain. But the Clean Neighbourhoods Act does have those provisions, and while I understand that this is expanding those, that's potentially why it's sitting in under the DAERA.
Yeah, okay. It's just it's not straightforward, to be honest.
Thank you. John?
Sure, thank you. I suppose I want to address some of the political realities around this, as well as some practical realities, but to set the background of that, in my time in politics, I've dealt, I think, with every example listed on the page of the briefing, from minor neglect to serious neglect to dilapidation to dangerous structure to environmental health risk, and probably a whole series more. And I have spent what seems like an adult lifetime calling myself for action to be taken and listening to others and agreeing with them, by the way, for government, whether central or otherwise, to do something about it. Okay, so this is proverbial money where proverbial mouth is, or do nothing. Now, in that bill, there is scope for councils to recover costs. The alternative to that, and I think we've come close to suggesting that I'm going to urge caution around this, there are two aspects to that caution. Firstly, I hope if government is going to be asked to source it, the people suggesting it will give some indication of where they'd like the money to come from, if there isn't additional resources from Treasury, which government budget should be sacrificed in order to look after this. And the second one is whether the principle of using public money to look after private buildings is right in the first place, because I'm sure I'm not the only person here who has worked on town centre initiatives and public realm schemes and all those things, and you suddenly find that the great nephew living in Australia who has inherited a property in a town centre in a village or town in Northern Ireland no longer cares or wants to be involved in the state of that building. Now, whatever we think of that approach to it on behalf of that person, the principle has to be that is that person's valuable or asset. And should public money be used to intervene to do that if there is no cost recovery? So the cost recovery aspect of this is absolutely crucial. And whether that's done by council locally, they're acting on the ground, and I happen to think there's a wide range of things where council are the best delivery partners because they know best what's happening in the areas, or whether it's central government, or two separate aspects. But I could not support a do-nothing approach to this, or giving up at the get-go, oh, this can't be done for this reason. It absolutely can be done. Councils find money for new schemes all the time, so does government. That's how it works, and I'm going to throw this in here. Members of the Assembly should be aware that when we pass new legislation in there as private members, governments centrally are not given new funding to fund the implementation of our legislation or the enforcement of our legislation. That's a fact of life. As a former policing board member, I know that the police service is not given additional funding when politicians, wherever it may be that's set in the law, enact legislation that has an implication on police resources. The police have to do that within existing budgets. So those are the practical realities, and the political realities are that we've been calling for this for some time, all of us collectively in one role or another, and we need to do something about it. I'm happy with the basics and the principles and the outline intent of this without question, and I think it's okay to have the conversations with local government and other delivery partners on this, but something needs to be done because the dilapidation is a serious problem. It impacts on the properties and the value of property of other people, and ultimately could present quite a serious health risk. So I hope we do find ourselves in a position where we can progress this and address the issues with the department and others. The only question, Suzie, I would have, if I may, is, and probably wasn't in the initial scope of the review, but the causes of dilapidation, separate issues altogether. There might well be that great nephew living in Australia, or it could be, like is the case in a number of places I represent, a building has become vacant, whether it's pre-dilapidation or ongoing. A building has become vacant and can't be utilised because there are infrastructural problems around wastewater or planning or whatever it might be. I can think of a couple in the town where my office is that would make superb hospitality venues, but there's no wastewater infrastructure. And they're never going to be financial institutions again. Planning can't or won't consent to new use because the infrastructure isn't there to allow that to happen. That can feed into dilapidation as well. So it might well be that if we haven't addressed it here, and I suspect we haven't, that as we progress this, we need to look at other implications from dilapidation or potential dilapidation and the reasons why it happens in the first place. Was there any of that coming through from anywhere that when you saw that?
On the face of the bill,
no.
It didn't go into that level of detail. It was, sort of certainly questions that had been asked in terms of, both in terms of exemptions, if they are going to offer exemptions for extenuating circumstances, or whether, you know, those exemptions should apply for certain circumstances, and whether maybe the guidance, this guidance document, which is to provide a lot more detail on the processes and how officials should follow each case. And so really, until we've had time to fully explore that.
The causes
guidance.
are separate, and social and policy issues separately. I get that. Okay, thank you.
Before I bring Daniel in for the last one, this is a short one, Daniel, please.
It always is, Chair.
It is I.
I completely get where John's coming from. I want this to have teeth so it's effective. That's my point. I'm also very conscious in areas there's extremely wealthy individuals that are land banking property, and it's happening in Strabane Town Centre, it's happening in Omagh Town Centre, in the hope that some government organisation will come along and offer this big windfall to resolve the problem. Where there's the means, absolutely enforce your way around to resolve it. But unfortunately, there is some that will just fall between the cracks. So really, I wanted to have teeth, because some of the things that are happening at the minute don't. You know, we have enforcement bodies there that are just not effective whatsoever at the present time. You turn up to meeting, first step inside is we've no money. What do you turn up for? You know, it's just, that's the point of Nick. That's not for you, by the way, that's me ramping. No, Suzie, don't do it.
Content? Yep. I mean, if we're going to be returning to this, guys. I agree with the last comments there. It's a bill that I would have been genuinely would be excited about getting. My point being, there's no point doing it if it isn't right and it doesn't have teeth. But we can add to that. I mean, we can amend it by a committee. We've got all of those.
But just by the way as well, Chair, this isn't just, you know, private landowners or property owners. There's significant, very wealthy organisations that are not looking after their property. I had a significant row publicly with Royal Mail over a historical sorting office, and only by exposure did they actually say, okay, we'll regenerate it. It was a listed building. There's endless lists. Banks as well, though banks would rather close than redo up their buildings in town centres these days. But there's organisations as well, you know, but equally there's public buildings, you know, libraries that are in a terrible state. They won't put a lick of paint on the front of the building. That is really having a detrimental impact on how a town centre looks. So, you know, public organisations need to lead from the front as well and make sure that they're looking after maintaining their own properties before we go after ratepayers.
Okay, members, thank you, Suzie. Really appreciate that. That was a good session. Thank you. Yep, and
reduce the my rounds.
Clark just wants to read something in here, guys. It's useful.
It's just really a reminder, picking up on something Suzie said, Chair, that last week we did have the draft guidance in our table papers, which has now gone out to councils for comment. So presumably a little while before that comes back to us. And clause 11, departmental officials are already working with DFC officials on amending the title of clause 11, which is currently called the defective premises notice, and DFC had picked up that was too close to their defective premises legislation and may cause confusion. So that work is already underway to potentially bring an amendment on, you know, the Minister to amend that clause title. Now we do have the officials with us next week anyway, so we can go into some of this.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Suzie.
Just can you get agreement that we would do that? Because if we can move on some of those things and get on to the Chair, you know, it speeds up the.
We'll agree with that.
If we can.
All right, yes. On the raised paper, guys, there's a whole raft of questions there. Suzie did speed through them, but there's a lot in there, so you're content. We use them as a template in terms of our communications with the department. And if you have anything else that comes to mind, feel free to feed them through to the clerk and myself, and we'll make sure they go on the paper, but we'll get that broad agreement. So we've broad agreement at the moment for those that were raised by Suzie, and additional points were brought up by members. Yep. Thank you. Superb. Okay. Agenda item 13 is the departmental written briefing update on the outcome of the consultation and introduction of mandatory CCTV in slaughterhouses in Northern Ireland and the proposed way forward. Refer to pages 325, 346 of the pack for the briefing paper on the way forward. As you'll recall, we received the written briefing on this matter on the 20th of March prior to the launch of the consultation proposing that mandatory CCTV coverage across all slaughterhouses could deter animal abuse, be a useful training tool for good practice, and facilitate the study of movement and behaviours of animals throughout the stage of slaughter. Mandatory coverage will also ensure parity of standards across the UK as regulations introduced into slaughterhouses are already in fact in England, Scotland and Wales. Behind the black wall as usual. Sadly, the majority of respondents were in agreement that CCTV should be mandatory in all approved slaughterhouses in areas where live animals are present, that the footage should be retained for 90 days with unrestricted access to the footage for authorised persons. The Department intends to publish the consultation response and way forward document and will progress work on drafting legislation to be made by draft affirmative resolution. If you have any comments, you can tend to note.
No.
Actually, look forward to that happening on a personal basis. Agenda item 14, Departmental written briefing update and progress of the DAERA DAFN Shared Island Bioeconomy Demonstration Initiative. Members, I refer you to pages 348 to 351 of the pack for the briefing providing an update on the joint £9 million DAERA DAFN initiative and an overview of the successful projects. On the 6th of March 2024, the initiative was announced with the aim to pilot bioeconomy and advancing all-island cooperation for biomass derived from land and marine areas. The funding will support the development of an agri-bioeconomy facility located in Northern Ireland and the development of a blue bioeconomy facility located in the Republic of Ireland. Following a three-stage evaluation process, the following two proposals were selected. Number one, the agri-bioeconomy project Northern Ireland Regenerates project is led by Greenville Energy based in Newton Stewart. The number two is the blue bioeconomy project, Republic of Ireland, the all-island marine bio-based refineries for circular blue bioeconomy initiative led by Chaugusk. This will facilitate collaboration and engagement to develop commercial bioeconomy solutions in the marine sector, where AMBI will convert aquatic biomass into a range of bio-based ingredients. Okay, members, have any comments? You can tend to note. Good piece of work. Okay, correspondence. Agenda item 15, refer to correspondence memo, page 354 of the pack. Referring to page 356 of the pack to that correspondence dated 19th of September from the Department regarding an update on the analysis. The analysis on the consultation of the third Northern Ireland Climate Change Adaptation Programme. A copy of the summary's response is also included in the pack, starting at page 358. The Department states that the response to the consultation broadly supportive of the Department's approach to developing the NICAP 3 and for the actions put forward in response to the UK's third change risk assessment. Officials are currently finalising that NICAP 3 and once executive agreement is obtained, we will provide a copy of the finalised consultation, analysis and programme ahead of laying in the Assembly. Content to note. Thank you, members. Members, item number 5.3, referred to page 438 of the pack, 443, to the correspondence dated 15th of September from the Department regarding NIEA regulatory fees and charges which were laid in the Business Office on the 15th of September. You content to note.
Yep.
Thank you, members. I refer to page 444 of the pack to a memo dated 18th of September from the Assembly and Executive Review Committee regarding its review of Assembly Committee engagement on cross-cutting executive strategies. It provides a list of cross-cutting strategies compiled by the Executive Office. As you will recall, we finalised our response to the call for evidence last week. You content to note. Page 484 of the pack, memo dated 19th of September from the Clerk of the Committee for Finance provides notification regarding the delayed introduction of the Cyber Security and Resilience Network and Information Bill and associated legislative consent, and also notification of the Public Office Accountability Bill, known as the Hillsborough Law, which was introduced to Parliament on the 16th of September. Are you content to note? Thank you. Members, refer to pages 557 561 of the pack for correspondence dated 19th September. The committee has been copied into from the Chair of the House of Lords, Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee, therefore providing a response regarding the marketing of retail goods regulations 2025. You content to note? Thank you. 562 to 569 of the pack for correspondence dated 19th September. The committee has been copied into the Chair of the House of Lords, Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee, to Right Honourable Nick Thomas Simmons, MP Minister for the Cabinet Office, providing a further response regarding veterinary medicines and the Windsor Framework. Are you content to note? And no, it's not finally. Refer to pages 570, 572, pages 573, 577 the pack email correspondence from an individual regarding wastewater discharges with the Strangford catchment. Members, the individual states that the discharges are incompatible with the Water Framework Directives and retained law at the Brexit and request that the committee investigate the matters. They question whether genuine progress is being made towards compliance with the Water Framework Directive and the protections of sensitive sites such as Strangford Loch. Have you have any comments, or are you content that we forward this to the Minister for comment?
Forward.
Thank you. Members, refer to page 578, 583 of the pack to email correspondence dated 4th of September to the committee has been copied into from an individual to the Crown Estate regarding what is described as a complaint of maladministration against the Department for Infrastructure. It relates to the mineral prospecting and an extraction proposal in the Sperrins area of outstanding natural beauty. Are you content to note? Thank you. Members, refer to page 584 to 585 of the pack to an invitation from the Consumer Council to an event celebrating its household expenditure tracker at the Long Gallery, which is 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Thursday, 23rd of October. You content to note. Thank you. Starting at page 586 of the back, refer to the OEP report titled Independent Assessment of the Effectiveness of the Noel Nutrients Action Programme. Are you content to note this will be useful background for our own event?
Yep.
Members referred page 29 of table papers to an invitation from the Noel Chamber of Commerce to an event titled Crossing the A1 Frontier to be held at the MAC Belfast. It's at 8:30 on Tuesday the 30th of September in the morning time.
Chair, I think that should have been AI. That's my mistake.
Yeah, AI. You needed AI to read that out then. Yeah. Okay. Members, we have gone through items in correspondence. Member, are there any items you wish to discuss? Thank you. Forward work programme, referred to forward work programme starting at page 33 of the papers. Are you content that it's published? Thank you. And I also referred to 37 of the table papers for directions for next week's committee meeting at Carrickfergus Marina. So after the meeting, we will be visiting the nature-friendly farm and then community greengrocers supplied by that farm. I also refer you to the clerk's memo at page 38 to 40 of the table papers concerning the possible venue options for the NAP stakeholder event. So, members, there's been a bit of work done on this in terms of our NAP event. I've had a look at them. I'm just going to give a suggestion as what I propose. I'm proposing that we hold the event at the Stormont Hotel on the 13th of November as the best option. We had looked at other dates. If we were going to hold a tape, it was going to move it into January for the Long Gallery event. I didn't think it was useful to have it on a Monday or a Tuesday, given plenary and the introduction of legislation, which is going to take a lot of our time away. So we need to just give the team some direction in regard to that in terms of organising, facilitating, getting the stakeholder invites out and agreeing all of that between ourselves. So members, if you've had a chance to look at that, could I get agreement? And I'm going to propose that we take the option of the Stormont Hotel on the 13th of November as the best option. Members content?
Sure, I'm not necessarily content. We're moving from an expenditure of hundreds of pounds here into thousands of pounds. So I suppose I need to know a bit more about the rationale for that. I'm just trying to find the exact figures here. Yeah, it's hundreds into thousands.
Okay, part of that is if we move it into the evening times with the staff, we're adding in actually cost which could be quantified, I suppose, John, in terms of additional time and time off required for the staff, and you know the clerk, the committee's team, which can be quantified if you like. That's taken off in the summer at other times. So this happens in in more of a committee time.
Chair, the engagement budget will cover half of it, and the committee will cover half of it.
So there was certainly quite a piece of work done between me and the clerk to reduce the cost as far as practical, but also ensure that it wasn't burdening the committee team, pulling them out of ours into the event as well. That's the balance. If you want some more information on that, we could certainly provide it.
That's fine.
You content? Members content? Okay, thank you. Okay, you can move forward to that then. Agenda 17. Any other business? No. Okay. The meeting is now adjourned. The date and time next meeting is next Thursday at the conference suite at Carrickfergus Marina. See you at 10 a.m. sharp.